As the King and Queen leave the thrones and head for the exit of Westminster Abbey of the coronation ceremony, you'll see that everyone bows and curtsies to the King, and no one moves a limb, a muscle, when Camilla passes.
Buckingham Palace did not call it a punishment. It did not describe it as a demotion. Yet the meaning of the announcement was impossible to hide. With a few carefully chosen sentences, Queen Camilla's freedom to represent the crown was suddenly restricted. Solo appearances would require approval. Patronage visits could be reassigned. Even familiar engagements were placed under review. And inside the palace, one devastating question spread faster than the official statement. Who had decided she could no longer be trusted? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Camilla read the printed announcement twice in her sitting room, then slowed at the sentence governing solo duties. The operational rule meant she could attend only selected ceremonial engagements automatically. Every independent visit, patronage appearance, speech, or unscheduled public meeting would now need written approval from the King's private secretary, the official who manages the monarch's working business, and the palace planning office. Her calendar had long been more than a list of appointments. It was proof that she possessed influence, judgment, and a public role of her own. Her expression hardened. She removed her glasses, lowered the page, and looked at the aide. "Has the King already approved this?" she asked. The aide did not answer. Camilla watched the silence settle between them and understood that Charles had known before she did. Charles remained alone in another room, staring at the authorization he signed. He placed the pen beside the document, but did not rise when an official confirmed that his wife had received the news. The King had defended her through decades of hostility, yet now his signature stood beneath a restriction, placing her choices in other hands. He felt the cost. This was not merely an administrative adjustment. It was a judgment on trust. Only a circle of senior officials had prepared the announcement. Camilla's household received the final wording moments before public release, leaving her advisors no chance to challenge, soften, or delay it. Worse still, the phrase "until further review" offered no deadline and no promise that her former freedom would return. The words could mean temporary control. They could also mark the beginning of a permanent retreat. Camilla folded the page carefully, but one detail stopped her. William's office had been consulted before hers. Her sadness sharpened into anger as she realized the future king had entered the decision while she had been kept outside it. But before Camilla could confront William, she first had to understand why Charles, the husband, who had defended her for decades, had allowed the palace to place a boundary around her name. For years, Charles and Camilla had survived scandal, rejection, and public hostility by presenting themselves as an unbreakable partnership. The palace rule threatened something none of those earlier battles had destroyed: trust between them. This was no longer a struggle against outside judgment. The signature beneath the restriction belonged to the king himself. And as Camilla waited for him behind a closed door, the woman beside the throne began to wonder whether the crown had finally become more important to Charles than she was. Camilla entered the study without waiting to be announced. She placed the statement on Charles's desk and asked why she had learned about the restriction from an official document instead of from her husband. The king looked toward the window before answering. As sovereign, the person responsible for protecting the stability and public confidence of the monarchy, he had been warned that confusion surrounding royal engagements could no longer continue. But Camilla did not ask about public confidence. She asked why he had not trusted her with the truth. Charles felt the accusation land. He knew how much her public work mattered because those charities and appearances had helped transform her from a rejected figure into a respected working royal. Yet he also understood the danger of allowing independent promises and sudden changes to disrupt a carefully coordinated institution. He admitted that he had feared she would try to stop the rule before it could be approved. Camilla did not raise her voice. That made the moment worse. She asked whether he still saw her as his partner or merely as another member of the royal household to be managed. The royal household meant the staff and offices responsible for organizing the monarch's work, security, communication, and public duties. Charles reached toward her hand, but she withdrew it and remained standing. William's name entered the room next. Charles revealed through the confidential review placed before him that the proposal had come from the prince, senior palace officials and constitutional advisors experts who guide the crown on how royal decisions affect the institution. He had approved it only after being warned that trusted staff might resign if their concerns were ignored. The king had not created the restriction, but he had given it life. Camilla understood the deeper danger immediately. This was no longer about a reduced calendar. If William and the Central Palace office could control her appearances now, they could later influence her staff, her charities, her place at state occasions, and even her position during the next reign. She looked at Charles and demanded to know what could possibly justify such an extraordinary decision. Charles lowered his voice. "What happened at the veterans' reception?" he said. Camilla's face changed. The anger did not disappear, but something colder replaced it. Both of them remembered that evening. The rule had been announced in the present, but its true beginning lay weeks earlier, inside a reception hall where one unscripted decision turned private concern into an irreversible palace crisis. Every palace crisis has a moment that appears small until history looks back upon it. For Camilla, that moment came during a national veterans reception beneath chandeliers, before invited families and within sight of senior officials. The program had been approved to the minute. The speeches had been cleared. Then Camilla stepped away from the schedule, summoned a grieving widow to the platform, and made an announcement no one in the royal household had authorized. The room applauded. Behind her, William did not. William had been scheduled to deliver the main address and announce a carefully funded support initiative for military families. The reception was meant to honor veterans while presenting one clear royal commitment. Camilla's role was limited to welcoming guests and presenting commemorative awards, formal honors given to recognize service and sacrifice. But tension had already been building for weeks. Her staff had challenged speech approvals and last-minute calendar restrictions, while palace officials feared her growing habit of changing plans without warning. Camilla noticed Eleanor Briggs standing near the back of the room. Eleanor was the widow of a decorated officer, and her documented account of losing both her husband and financial security had deeply affected the Queen before the event. Moved by the woman's story, she invited her forward. Then she promised that her charitable network would personally fund a family support program carrying the late officer's name. William did not interrupt. He stood motionless as applause swept through the reception, then quietly closed his speech folder. The prince knew the promise overlapped with the initiative he was moments away from unveiling. Camilla saw his expression change, but she continued. To her, compassion could not be delayed merely because it had not appeared on a schedule. To him, she had displaced months of planning with a commitment no one had approved. Senior officials discovered the danger almost immediately. The program had no secured budget, no legal review, and no consent from the charity trustees, the people responsible for making sure charitable funds are used lawfully. Camilla's emotional promise now placed the palace under pressure to deliver money it had never formally committed. What had sounded generous in the room threatened embarrassment once the details emerged. William waited until the guests had left before confronting her in a side corridor. He told Camilla that personal instinct could not override collective responsibility. She answered that a monarchy frightened of spontaneous humanity had already forgotten its purpose. The future king insisted that compassion without preparation could damage the people it claimed to help. She replied that preparation without courage could make royal service meaningless. A nearby courtier heard enough to understand that compromise had collapsed. That same evening, William sent Charles a documented recommendation calling for centralized approval of Camilla's independent duties. The first page carried the reception's date. Weeks later, when Camilla finally entered the same room as William again, neither of them was discussing charity or protocol. They were fighting over who had the right to define service to the crown. The confrontation lasted less than 20 minutes, but those inside the palace would remember every silence. Camilla entered first, carrying the announcement under one arm. William arrived without an aide. Charles remained between them, though he soon discovered that no position in the room could shield him from what followed. Years of restrained resentment over loyalty, memory, authority, and the future of the monarchy were suddenly concentrated into one question. Had William protected the crown or used the crown to diminish Camilla? Charles had arranged the discussion inside a small audience room, hoping the dispute would not spread through the wider family. An audience room is a private palace space used for formal meetings with the monarch, though this conversation would have none of the usual ceremony. No secretaries attended. No official minutes were taken. The king wanted honesty, But the absence of witnesses only made every word more personal. William placed the engagement review on the table. The documented report listed missed briefings, altered schedules, and public commitments made without authorization. He told Camilla the restriction concerned conduct, not rank, and that any working royal, creating the same risks, would face similar controls. The prince believed coordinated appearances mattered because one careless promise could damage charities, confuse the public, and weaken trust in the family's judgment. Camilla set the palace announcement beside his report. She asked whether he had wanted her removed from public life from the beginning. William did not offer comfort. He said he wanted the monarchy protected from avoidable disorder. She heard the word disorder as a description of everything she had built, and the humiliation cut deeper than an open insult. Camilla turned toward Charles. She asked whether he truly believed she had damaged the crown. The king struggled before admitting that her intentions had been compassionate, but her judgment had placed staff, charities, and the institution in an impossible position. He reached for gentler words, yet she heard only the verdict beneath them. Her husband had chosen the monarchy's security over defending her without condition. William then disclosed that several engagements would be transferred to Catherine, Sophie, and Anne during the review. Catherine would take selected public visits, while the trusted confidant and the Princess Royal would assume other duties. The review, a formal examination used to decide whether existing arrangements should continue, was no longer merely limiting Camilla. It was redistributing her influence. Camilla accused William of testing the powers he expected to exercise as king. He did not deny considering the next reign. The future king said he could not inherit weaknesses everyone had been too frightened to confront. Charles ended the argument. He lifted the rule, signed the implementation page, and placed the pen down. The restriction was final. Camilla left believing William had defeated her, yet the deeper truth was more unsettling. The prince had never possessed enough authority to impose the rule alone. Royal power rarely announces itself through raised voices. More often it appears in briefing papers, altered calendars, and conversations held before the principal figures enter the room. Camilla had focused her anger on William because he had confronted her openly, but the restriction carried the approval of a far wider coalition. Senior courtiers, financial officers, legal advisors, and experienced members of the family had reached the same conclusion independently. The palace could no longer allow one person's instinct to outrun the machinery supporting the crown. Charles discovered how far that concern had spread when the Lord Chamberlain's office delivered its internal examination. The office coordinates major royal ceremonies and helps maintain order across palace operations. Its documented review studied unscripted commitments, overlapping announcements, and charitable promises made without full authorization. Several royal households appeared in the findings, but Camilla's team was identified as the most urgent concern. The warning carried real power. Palace staff coordinate security, funding, communications, charity work, and contact with the government. When those systems lose coordination, public appearances can create legal obligations, financial confusion, or security risks. Charles could ignore one complaint. He could not dismiss an entire group without risking paralysis inside the institution he was responsible for protecting. Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, received the proposed wording during a private consultation. The trusted confidant read it slowly before admitting that the rule would humiliate Camilla. She understood how hard the Queen had worked to earn acceptance. Yet Sophie also said that continued disorder would eventually hurt Camilla, Charles, and every charity depending on royal credibility. Her sympathy remained genuine, but it did not become opposition. Anne delivered an even harder judgment during a private conversation with her brother. Princess Anne told Charles that compassion could not excuse promises the monarchy might be unable to honor. She saw his distress and softened her voice, reminding him that Camilla's intentions had not been cruel. But Anne refused to recommend withdrawing the restriction, because good intentions could not protect the crown from consequences. Charles then received the most alarming evidence. Two experienced officials had prepared written resignation letters, stating that they could no longer accept responsibility for engagements they were not allowed to control. Their threatened departure transformed the dispute from a family disagreement into a governance emergency. The king now understood that refusing the rule might weaken the entire palace structure. One secret remained. A confidential annex, an additional section attached to the main review, offered Camilla a path back. Her independence could be restored after a successful review period if her office accepted centralized planning, financial clearance, and advanced speech approval. Charles deliberately kept that condition out of the public announcement. Camilla did not know the door remained open. Acting from anger, she ordered her staff to cancel a major engagement before officials could reassign it. By the following morning, the restriction had moved from paper into reality, and the empty space beside Charles revealed how quickly private defiance could become public fallout. The first consequence was not announced. It was seen. At a long-planned literacy reception, an upholstered chair stood beside the king's place beneath the palace lights. Camilla's name remained on an early version of the program, but she never entered the room. Guests glanced toward the doorway. Charles began the event alone, and as cameras recorded the empty seat, a rule designed to create order produced an image far more emotionally powerful than any official statement. A husband continuing, while his wife remained absent. Camilla had been scheduled to join Charles at the national reception because literacy work had become one of the clearest symbols of her public service. The gathering brought together teachers, authors, and charity leaders who depended on royal attention to attract funding and wider support. Her office withdrew her attendance after learning that every line of her remarks required fresh approval under the new framework, the system now controlling how her engagements were planned and authorized. Charles asked the same question twice before entering. Had Camilla changed her mind? An aide finally confirmed that she had not. The king touched the back of the empty chair and instructed staff to leave it where it stood. Removing it might have hidden the absence, but he could not bring himself to erase the place meant for his wife. His loyalty remained visible. So did his hurt. Camilla watched the coverage from a private room. She had expected the cancellation to show that she would not quietly accept being managed by officials who had excluded her from the decision. Instead, the camera lingered on the chair beside Charles. She switched off the broadcast, and her anger gave way to something heavier. Her protest had not embarrassed the palace machinery. It had left her husband standing alone before the public. The consequences widened before the reception ended. 3 solo visits, a charity roundtable, and a recorded address were suspended until approval could be completed. Catherine and Sophie were asked to cover 2 of the engagements. The Princess of Wales would take 1 public visit, while the Duchess of Edinburgh would assume another, confirming that Camilla's influence was already being redistributed. Camilla's staff then divided around her. Some advisors urged cooperation, warning that resistance could make the restriction permanent. Others argued that accepting the controls would normalize outside authority over her household, the team responsible for managing her duties and charitable relationships. The people who once protected her now disagreed over whether survival required patience or defiance. Charles ended the day by dismissing his aides and calling Camilla himself. He did not mention schedules, speeches, or approval forms. He asked her to meet him in the garden without secretaries, documents, or royal titles between them. The next morning, husband and wife walked beyond the palace walls together, carrying no files and accompanied by no officials. Only the painful truth neither had yet been able to say indoors. There were no advisors in the garden, and no polished table separating them. Charles waited beside a gravel path as Camilla approached in silence. For the first time since the announcement, he was not speaking as sovereign, and she was not answering as queen. They were simply 2 people confronting what power had done to their marriage. The rule remained in force. The humiliation remained real. Yet within that private conversation, Camilla finally heard the fear Charles had been unable to express inside the palace. Charles had chosen the garden because every formal room had turned their pain into a debate about authority. No briefing folders stood between them. No official witnesses recorded their words. A sovereign is the reigning monarch responsible for protecting the crown, but that morning he spoke first as a husband. He admitted that the monarchy had entered a fragile period, one in which public confidence depended on discipline, unity, and a clear chain of responsibility. Camilla listened without interrupting. Charles told her he feared that ignoring the warnings from senior officials would leave William with a divided and unstable royal household. The future king would inherit not only titles and ceremonies, but every unresolved conflict hidden beneath them. Charles had believed the restriction would contain the danger. Instead, it had exposed a deeper fracture inside his marriage. Camilla finally told him what had hurt most. Losing engagements had been humiliating, but learning that her future had been discussed with William, courtiers, and advisors before anyone spoke to her felt like betrayal. She had stood beside Charles through scandal, rejection, and years of public hostility. Yet when the hardest decision arrived, he had treated her like a liability to be controlled, rather than a partner worthy of the truth. Charles did not defend himself. He admitted that he had feared the confrontation and hoped the official process would carry the burden for him. By avoiding one painful conversation, he had created a far greater wound. Camilla softened because he finally named the damage without hiding behind royal duty. Charles then disclosed the restoration clause contained in the confidential annex. The clause, an additional condition attached to the rule, created a 6-month review period. Camilla could regain greater control of her diary if her office accepted coordinated planning, financial clearance, and advance approval of speeches. He had hidden that path because he feared appearing uncertain, but his silence had made the restriction feel permanent. Camilla accepted the review on one condition. Charitable emergencies must receive rapid approval so genuine need would not disappear beneath bureaucracy. Charles agreed, giving her a voice in reshaping the system that had limited her. Before they returned indoors, Camilla made one final decision. She would attend the next approved engagement beside him. She would issue no defensive statement and offer no public complaint. When Camilla finally reappeared, the world was already waiting to decide whether it was witnessing surrender, survival, or the beginning of a different kind of royal influence. By sunrise, the palace restriction had escaped the language of administration and entered the theater of public judgment. Newspapers turned it into a battle for royal power. Broadcasters replayed the empty chair. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace, some defending Camilla and others praising a stricter monarchy. Then the palace confirmed she would appear beside Charles at a community reading center. It would be her first engagement under the new rule, and every movement would be interpreted as either humiliation or defiance. News programs divided the crisis into two competing stories. One presented William as the future king, modernizing a disordered royal household. The other described the rule as an extraordinary restriction imposed upon Charles's wife. A royal household means the staff and offices that organize a senior royal's public work, communications, and responsibilities. That distinction mattered because the argument was no longer only about Camilla's behavior. It had become a test of how much independence any royal figure should possess. Camilla's return was prepared with unusual care. Her remarks were shortened, the schedule was fixed, and every charitable announcement received financial clearance before she arrived. The new system left no room for spontaneous promises. Palace officials wanted proof that discipline could restore stability, while the Queen understood that one unexpected sentence might be used to justify permanent control over her role. Camilla saw the morning newspaper during the drive. Its front page showed Charles beside the empty chair beneath the headline, "The Queen reined in." She folded the paper inward and quietly asked her aide to keep it away from the king before the engagement. She could bear the insult herself. She did not want him carrying it into the room beside her. The crowd outside Buckingham Palace exposed the depth of division. Several hundred onlookers gathered near the gates. One group held flowers and called Camilla's name. Another applauded the tighter restrictions. A procedural change had become a public referendum on whether she still belonged at the center of royal life. Charles remained close when they arrived at the reading center, but Camilla did not seek protection from him. She followed the approved program exactly. When a young volunteer asked whether she would continue supporting literacy projects, the Queen answered that service mattered more than who received the attention. The words challenged no official rule, yet their meaning was unmistakable. She would accept limits without abandoning purpose. William watched a recording later. The prince noticed that she had neither attacked the decision nor appeared defeated. He told an aide that her restraint had lowered the temperature more effectively than any formal palace statement. Charles acted that evening. He invited Camilla and William to one final private meeting. They would no longer debate whether the rule existed. They would decide what it meant. The announcement had begun as a restriction, but its final meaning would be determined in a room where 3 people were finally prepared to separate personal victory from the survival of the crown. The final meeting did not reverse the rule, erase the humiliation, or pretend the conflict had never happened. Instead, it produced something the palace had failed to achieve from the beginning: an honest settlement. Camilla accepted that her public role would operate within stricter limits. William accepted that discipline without dignity could become cruelty. Charles accepted that silence had wounded both his wife and his heir. By the time the 3 of them rose, no one had won completely, and that was precisely why the monarchy had survived. Charles confirmed that the 6-month review would remain in place. Camilla's solo appearances, speeches, and discretionary patronage visits would still require central authorization, meaning approval from the palace office coordinating senior royal duties. However, a rapid response process would now handle urgent charitable cases and personal interventions. The change mattered because it preserved order without forcing genuine human need to wait behind endless paperwork. Catherine, Sophie, and Anne would retain several of the engagements reassigned during the crisis. Their continued involvement reduced pressure on Camilla and created a clearer division of work across the royal family. The working royal structure, the system through which senior family members perform official duties on behalf of the crown, would become more coordinated. What began as a restriction on one woman was now presented as a permanent reform affecting everyone. William turned to Camilla before the meeting ended. He told her directly that he had never intended to erase her contribution. The prince admitted that his determination to protect the future had made him overlook the dignity she deserved in the present. She answered that building the next reign did not require treating those serving today as expendable. Neither apologized for caring about the monarchy. Both acknowledged that their methods had transformed concern into hostility. Charles waited until William had left before giving Camilla a complete copy of every document connected to the review. The king promised that no future decision concerning her role would be discussed without her participation. She accepted the papers, placed them aside, and took his hand. The gesture did not erase the betrayal, but it proved trust could be rebuilt through honesty. Camilla changed after the crisis. She accepted fewer engagements, prepared more carefully, and focused her energy on literacy, domestic abuse support, and older citizens. Her influence became less spontaneous and less visible, yet far more deliberate. The rule had reduced her freedom, but it had not removed her from royal life. The monarchy learned its hardest lesson. Affection could not replace accountability, but accountability without trust could destroy a family. Loyalty no longer meant unquestioning protection. It meant setting boundaries, admitting mistakes, and remaining together afterward. The palace had reduced Camilla's freedom, but in doing so, it revealed the final truth of her position. She would remain beside the king, not beyond accountability, not outside the future William was building, but firmly within a monarchy that had chosen survival over silence. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.